The sound of a rattling buckboard wagon jerked Olivia Kane awake, her heart pounding against her ribs as the harsh morning light streamed through the tattered curtains of her farmhouse window. Outside, the voices of men strangers echoed across her drought-stricken land, and she knew with sickening certainty that the day she had feared for months had finally arrived. Colorado Territory, 1871. The unforgiving summer had stripped Olivia's once promising farm to nothing but dust and dead crops. At 26, she was about to lose everything her late father had built, everything she had fought to keep after his passing 2 years prior. Olivia dressed hurriedly, her fingers trembling as she fastened the buttons of her worn cotton dress. The mirror reflected a woman she hardly recognized: hollow cheeks, dark circles beneath once vibrant green eyes, and auburn hair that had lost its luster. Hunger and worry had taken their toll over the long months of failed crops and mounting debts. The voices outside grew louder. She recognized Sheriff Wilson's deep baritone among them. "Miss Kane," the sheriff called, knocking firmly on her door. "I'm afraid I need you to come out now." Olivia straightened her shoulders, refusing to let these men see her break. Her father had taught her better than that. With a deep breath, she opened the door to face the small gathering of men standing in her yard. Sheriff Wilson removed his hat, revealing his balding head slick with sweat. "Miss Kane, as you know, the bank has foreclosed on your property due to unpaid loans. I'm here with Mr. Peterson from the bank to oversee the legal transfer of ownership." The thin banker beside him nodded grimly. "We've found a buyer for the property, Miss Kane. The agreement includes the land, the house, and all remaining livestock and equipment." "And what of me?" Olivia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The banker and sheriff exchanged uncomfortable glances before Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "Well, you see, the situation is rather unusual. The bank has arranged for your services to be part of the sale." Olivia's blood ran cold. "My services? What exactly does that mean, Mr. Peterson?" "Your expertise with the land, Miss Kane," the sheriff interjected quickly. "The new owner has purchased not just the property, but has offered to pay your outstanding debts in exchange for your continued work here, should you choose to accept. And if I don't, then you'll be escorted from the property immediately with whatever personal belongings you can carry," the banker stated flatly. Olivia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her options had whittled down to nothing. With no family, no money, and nowhere to go, she was being sold along with her land not as a slave, perhaps, but the distinction felt academic. "Who?" she asked simply. "Who has bought my father's land?" As if summoned by her question, a tall figure on horseback appeared at the edge of her property. The rising sun silhouetted him, casting long shadows across the parched earth as he approached. The stranger dismounted with the easy grace of a man who had spent his life in the saddle. He removed his hat as he walked toward them, revealing thick dark hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. "Miss Kane," the sheriff said, "may I introduce Mr. Preston Northrop, the new owner of your farm?" Preston Northrop was not what Olivia had expected. There was no gleam of triumph in his deep blue eyes, no smugness in his expression as he extended his hand toward her. He was younger than she'd anticipated, perhaps 30, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard. "Miss Kane," he said, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl, "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Olivia ignored his outstretched hand. "Are you?" "These gentlemen have just informed me that you've not only purchased my family's land, but have also arranged to buy my services along with it." Something flickered across his face: surprise, perhaps, or discomfort. "That's not exactly. It's exactly how it sounds, Mr. Northrop," she cut in. "You've bought yourself a farm and a woman to work it." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Miss Kane." "It's all right, Sheriff," Preston said, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "Miss Kane has every right to be angry." He turned to the banker. "Mr. Peterson, would you and the sheriff give us a moment?" Once they had retreated to a respectful distance, Preston spoke quietly. "I didn't buy you, Miss Kane. I bought this farm because it borders my ranch, and I need the water rights. The arrangement regarding your continued presence here was my attempt to offer you a choice rather than see you thrown off your land with nothing." "Some choice," Olivia said bitterly. "You can stay and help me restore this farm, using your knowledge of the land, and I'll pay you a fair wage. Or you can take what you can carry and start fresh elsewhere. Either way, your debts are cleared. Olivia studied him, searching for deceit. Why would you pay my debts without guarantee of my staying? Because it was the right thing to do, he answered simply. And because I've heard you know this land better than anyone in the county. I'd be a fool not to want that knowledge. And where would I live if I stayed? In your house, of course. I have my own place a few miles west. I'm looking for a farm manager, not a housekeeper. His words surprised her. The thought of remaining in her family home, of not having to abandon the last connection to her parents, stirred something inside her, a flicker of hope she'd thought long extinguished. I don't need charity, Mr. Northrop. I'm not offering charity. I'm proposing a business arrangement between equals. He looked around at the failing farm. This land has potential, but it needs work I don't have the knowledge to do alone. You stay, teach me how to make it thrive again, and I'll pay you fairly for your labor and expertise. Olivia's mind raced. She had nowhere to go, no family to turn to. The prospect of starting over in some strange town, possibly ending up as a laundress or worse, held little appeal. At least here, she would have a roof over her head and work she knew how to do. I'll consider your offer, Mr. Northrop, she said finally. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. That's all I ask. Take today to think it over. I'll return tomorrow for your answer. As Preston walked back to his horse, Olivia watched him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Who was this man who would pay her debts regardless of her decision? What was his true motive? One thing was certain: Preston Northrop was unlike any man she had encountered before in Julesburg, and she wasn't sure if that was a comfort or a cause for concern. After Preston rode away with the sheriff and banker, Olivia stood alone in her yard, staring at the faded sign that had once proudly announced Kane Family Farm. The wind whispered through the failing crops, a sound like a sigh of resignation. She had until tomorrow to decide her fate. For now, that would have to be enough. The following morning, Olivia rose before dawn, a habit ingrained from years of farm work. She moved through her morning routine mechanically, washing her face in the basin of cool water, dressing in her work clothes, a simple cotton shirt and sturdy skirt, and twisting her hair into a practical braid. Today she would give Preston Northrop her answer, though she barely slept considering her options. In truth, there was only one viable choice. She would stay and work for the man who now owned her family's legacy. The alternative was unthinkable. Olivia stepped onto her porch just as the first golden rays of sunlight stretched across the eastern horizon. The sight of her land in the soft morning light still had the power to steal her breath, even in its current state of disrepair. Her father had chosen this plot for its rich soil and reliable creek. At least it had been reliable before the drought. Now the creek had dwindled to a trickle, and the soil had turned to dust that blew away with each gust of wind. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention to the road. Preston Northrop appeared, riding a different horse than the day before, a dappled gray mare that moved with elegant strides. He wore simple work clothes rather than the finer attire he'd had on during their first meeting. This was a man dressed for labor, not business. "Good morning, Miss Kane," he called as he dismounted. "I hope I'm not too early." "I've been up for hours, Mr. Northrop," she replied. "On a farm, the day begins with the sun." A smile tugged at his lips. "Indeed it does. I see we share that understanding at least." He tied his horse to the porch rail and removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. In the clear morning light, Olivia could see details she'd missed before: a small scar above his right eyebrow, laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his gaze seemed to take in everything at once, assessing and considering. "Have you come to a decision?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "I'll stay, Mr. Northrop, but I have conditions." "I expected no less. Please, continue." "I want everything in writing: my position, my wages, my right to continue living in this house. And I want it understood that I answer to you only in matters concerning the farm. My personal life remains my own." Preston's expression remained neutral. "Those seem like reasonable requests. Anything else?" Olivia hesitated before adding, "If I find your behavior or intentions toward me to be improper in any way, I reserve the right to leave immediately with a month's wages as severance." A flash of something, perhaps offense, crossed his features before he composed himself. Miss Kane, I can assure you that my interest is purely in the land and its potential. I'm a businessman, not a scoundrel, but I'm happy to include that provision if it eases your mind. Olivia felt a flush of embarrassment, but stood her ground. A woman alone had to be cautious, particularly with a man who now held such power over her circumstances. Then we have an agreement, she said. Preston nodded. We do. I'll have the papers drawn up today in Julesburg and bring them for your review tomorrow. Now, would you be willing to show me around the property? I'd like to get a better understanding of what we're working with. The word "we" caught Olivia's attention, a small thing, perhaps, but significant. This man spoke as though they were partners in this venture, not master and servant. It was a distinction that both confused and intrigued her. Of course, she replied. Though I should warn you, there's not much to see but failure at the moment. I see potential, Miss Kane. Let's focus on that instead. They spent the morning walking the boundaries of the farm. Olivia showed him the creek that had once provided ample water for crops and livestock, the fallow fields where wheat and corn had once grown tall, the small orchard of apple trees that had somehow survived the drought better than most. Preston asked intelligent questions, listening carefully to her answers, and occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound book he carried. He showed particular interest in the irrigation system her father had designed, examining the now dried ditches with focused attention. Your father was an innovative man, he remarked as they stood in the shade of the apple trees. This system could work again with some modifications. The problem isn't the system, Olivia explained. It's the water. The creek has been running low for 2 years now. Preston nodded thoughtfully. I've been studying the water patterns in this region. There's a natural spring on my property that hasn't diminished much despite the drought. With some work, we might be able to divert some of that water here. That would be significant, Olivia said carefully, trying not to let hope take root too quickly. It would be a start, he agreed. The real issue is finding more drought-resistant crops and better farming methods for this climate. I've been corresponding with agricultural experts back east who have some promising ideas. Olivia studied him with newfound curiosity. You seem to know a great deal about farming for a rancher. A smile touched his lips. I grew up on a farm in Virginia. Ranching came later, after the war. His expression clouded briefly. But farming was my first love. They continued their tour, stopping by the barn where Olivia's last remaining livestock, 2 milk cows, a workhouse, and a few chickens were housed. They're thin, Preston observed, but healthy enough. We can build the herd back once we have the feed to sustain them. By noon, the heat had become oppressive, and Olivia suggested they take a break. She led Preston to the kitchen, where she poured them both glasses of water from the pump. May I ask you something, Mr. Northrop? She said as they sat at her worn kitchen table. Of course. Why this farm? There are others for sale in the county, one's in better condition. Why choose mine? Preston considered his answer carefully. Several reasons. The location is ideal for my purposes. It connects my ranch to the main road, and the creek, even diminished, is a valuable water source. But more importantly, he paused, seeming to weigh his words. I admired how long you held on when others would have given up. That kind of determination speaks to the quality of the land and the people who worked it. Olivia wasn't sure how to respond to the unexpected compliment. The land deserved our best effort, she said finally. Exactly, Preston agreed. And it still does. Which is why I hope our partnership will be successful. The word partnership, again, when what existed between them was clearly an employer-employee relationship. Olivia decided not to comment on it. Perhaps it was simply his way of making the situation more palatable for both of them. What are your plans for the farm? She asked instead. To restore it, primarily. I believe with the right approach, this land can be productive again. I'm thinking smaller plots of diverse crops rather than the vast single-crop fields that are common around here. Less vulnerability to drought and pests that way. His ideas were sound, Olivia had to admit. Her father had often spoken of crop diversity, but had ultimately followed the practices common in the region. That would require significant labor, she pointed out. Yes, it would. I plan to hire a few hands from town to help with the heaviest work. But the planning and oversight would fall to us. Olivia nodded, already mentally cataloging what would need to be done. The thought of bringing the farm back to life stirred something within her, a purpose she had nearly lost in the desperate struggle to simply keep the property. I should get back to my ranch, Preston said, standing. There are matters I need to attend to before tomorrow. Is there anything you need from town? I'll be going there to have those papers drawn up. The offer took Olivia by surprise. Some flour, if it wouldn't be too much trouble. I'm nearly out. Consider it done. He placed his hat back on his head. Thank you for the tour, Miss Kane. I look forward to our work together. As she watched him ride away, Olivia felt a strange mixture of emotions. Uncertainty about her future still predominated, but there was something else there too, a small, fragile spark of hope that perhaps this unusual arrangement might lead to something better than mere survival. True to his word, Preston returned the following day with legal papers documenting their arrangement. The terms were fair, generous, even providing Olivia with a monthly salary, continued residence in her family home, and the security provisions she had requested. He also brought supplies, not just flour, but coffee, sugar, and even a small bag of hard candies. The supplies are in advance on your first month's wages, he explained when she protested. We can't work effectively if you're hungry. Olivia signed the papers with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was grateful to remain on her land. On the other, the signature formalized the loss of her independence. Still, Preston's respectful demeanor and fair terms gave her reason to believe this arrangement might work. The following weeks established a new routine. Preston would arrive early in the morning, and they would work side by side restoring the farm. They began with the irrigation system, modifying it to make better use of the limited water supply. Preston brought materials and hired 2 young men from town to help with the heavy digging. He proved to be a knowledgeable and tireless worker, never asking Olivia to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Often, she found him still working as the sun set, long after the hired hands had gone home. His dedication matched her own, and slowly, grudgingly, she began to respect him. One evening in late August, as they sat on her porch drinking water after a particularly grueling day extending the irrigation ditches, Preston broached a new subject. I've been thinking about the orchard, he said. Those apple trees have survived better than anything else on the property. Olivia nodded. My mother planted those trees when I was a child. They've always been sturdy. What would you think about expanding it? Fruit trees take time to mature, but they're a good long-term investment, more resistant to drought than grain crops once established. It's a sound idea, Olivia agreed, but the initial investment would be significant. I'm willing to make that investment. He turned to look at her directly. This isn't just about immediate returns for me, Miss Kane. I'm building something to last. There was a passion in his voice that caught her attention. Why is this farm so important to you, Mr. Northrop? You have your ranch. This seems like a great deal of effort for some additional acreage. Preston was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains now turning purple in the fading light. My father lost our farm in Virginia after the war, he said finally. He died believing he had failed our family. I came west determined to build something that would last, something that would have made him proud. He gestured toward the land before them. This place has good bones, as my father would have said. It deserves to thrive again. The personal revelation surprised Olivia. In the weeks they had worked together, Preston had shared little about his past beyond the occasional mention of farming techniques he had learned as a boy. I'm sorry about your father, she said quietly. Thank you. He was a good man. Stubborn, like someone else I know. A hint of a smile softened his words. Olivia felt her cheeks warm slightly. My father was the same. He believed in this land when everyone told him it was foolish to try farming here. Tell me about him, Preston said, settling back in his chair. The invitation to share memories of her father opened a floodgate Olivia hadn't realized was dammed. She told Preston about Thomas Kane, a man who had brought his wife and young daughter west after the war, determined to build a new life in the expanding frontier. She described his patient teaching, his innovative mind, the way he had encouraged her to understand farming as both science and art. He taught me to read the land, she explained, to understand its patterns and needs rather than trying to force it to conform to what we wanted. A wise approach, Preston said, one we would do well to follow now. Darkness had fallen completely by the time their conversation wound down. Preston stood reluctantly. I should head back. We have an early start tomorrow with the new shipment of lumber arriving. Of course, Olivia said, suddenly aware of how comfortable their conversation had become. It unsettled her how easily she had shared memories she had kept close for so long. As Preston prepared to leave, he paused. "Miss Kane, there's a harvest social in town this Saturday. I was wondering if you might consider attending with me." The invitation caught Olivia completely off guard. "With you?" "As colleagues," he added quickly. "It would be a good opportunity to connect with other farmers in the area, perhaps gain some local knowledge that could help us. And," he hesitated, "it might do you good to have an evening away from the farm." Olivia couldn't remember the last time she had gone into Julesburg for anything but necessities. The thought of a social gathering, particularly in the company of the man who now owned her farm, filled her with trepidation. "I don't know, Mr. Northrop." "Preston," he said. "After all these weeks of working together, I think you might call me Preston." The shift to a more personal footing made Olivia even more uncertain. "I'll consider it," she said finally. He nodded, accepting her non-committal answer. "Good night, Miss Kane." "Good night, Preston," she replied, testing the name. His smile in response was worth the small concession. After he had gone, Olivia remained on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky. Something was changing between them, a shift from reluctant business associates to something approaching friendship. The realization was both comforting and alarming. Preston Northrop was still her employer, still the man who owned the land that should have been hers. Allowing herself to forget that fundamental truth could only lead to complications. Yet when Saturday arrived, Olivia found herself washing her hair and pressing her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had rarely seen use in recent years. She told herself it was merely a practical decision. Connections with other farmers could indeed be valuable, and an evening of conversation and music would be a welcome change from endless labor. But as she pinned her hair more carefully than necessary and added a touch of her mother's lavender water to her wrists, Olivia admitted to herself that there was more to her decision than practicality. She was curious about Preston Northrop outside the context of work, curious about the man who spoke of building something to last, who remembered his father with such evident love, who treated her with a respect she had not expected. Preston arrived promptly at 6, driving a smart buggy rather than riding horseback. He had traded his work clothes for a clean shirt, vest, and string tie, and had clearly made an effort to tame his usually windblown hair. The sight of him looking so proper brought an unexpected smile to Olivia's lips. "You look very nice, Miss Kane," he said as he helped her into the buggy. "Thank you. And since you've asked me to call you Preston, I suppose it's only fair that you call me Olivia." His smile brightened his entire face. "Olivia, then. It suits you better than Miss Kane." The drive to Julesburg was pleasant, the evening air cool after the heat of the day. Preston pointed out changes in the town as they approached, new buildings being constructed, evidence of growth despite the challenging agricultural conditions of recent years. "Julesburg is resilient," he commented, "like its people." The social was being held in the newly built community hall, a simple but spacious structure at the center of town. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the gathered townspeople. A small band of local musicians played lively tunes, and tables laden with food lined one wall. Olivia felt a flutter of anxiety as they entered. It had been so long since she had participated in a social gathering, and her circumstances had changed so dramatically. How would the townspeople view her now? As a failed farmer? As Preston Northrop's employee? The thought made her stomach tighten. Preston seemed to sense her discomfort. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked, guiding her toward the refreshment table. "Yes, thank you," she replied, grateful for the momentary distraction. As Preston fetched them both cups of punch, Sheriff Wilson approached Olivia. "Miss Kane," he said, removing his hat. "It's good to see you in town. We've been wondering how you've been faring." The concern in his voice seemed genuine enough, though Olivia couldn't help remembering his role in the transfer of her property. "I'm well, Sheriff. Thank you," she replied politely. "Glad to hear it. Northrop treating you fairly out there?" "Very fairly," she confirmed, just as Preston returned with their drinks. "Sheriff," Preston nodded in greeting. "Enjoying the festivities?" "Indeed I am. Just telling Miss Kane here how pleased we all are to see her out and about." He lowered his voice slightly. "There was some concern in town about your arrangement, but I'm glad to see it working out." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks at the implication. Mr. Northrop has been a perfect gentleman, Sheriff. Our arrangement is strictly professional. Of course, the sheriff backtracked quickly. I meant no offense. None taken, Preston said smoothly. But if you'll excuse us, I promise to introduce Olivia to Mr. Gardner. He's had success with drought-resistant wheat varieties that might interest us. As Preston guided her away, his hand briefly touched the small of her back, a light, proper touch, yet Olivia was acutely aware of it. I apologize for the sheriff's insinuation, Preston said quietly once they were out of earshot. It's to be expected, I suppose, Olivia replied. A single woman living on property owned by a bachelor is bound to generate talk. Preston's expression turned serious. If the talk causes you discomfort, we can be more careful about appearances. I've never much cared for town gossip, Olivia said with more confidence than she felt. Besides, we have done nothing improper. No, we haven't, Preston agreed, though something in his tone made Olivia wonder if the thought had crossed his mind. The introduction to Farmer Gardner proved fruitful, as did subsequent conversations with other local farmers and ranchers. Preston seamlessly included Olivia in these discussions, deferring to her knowledge of the Kane farm and its particular conditions. His respect for her expertise was evident, and Olivia found herself relaxing into the role of knowledgeable farmer rather than charity case. As the evening progressed, the band struck up a waltz, and couples moved to the cleared space in the center of the hall. Would you care to dance? Preston asked, his blue eyes reflecting the lantern light. Olivia hesitated. Dancing seemed a step beyond collegiality, yet she found herself wanting to accept. I'm afraid I'm out of practice, she hedged. As am I, he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. We can be unpracticed together. The logic was flawed but charming, and Olivia found herself being led to the dance floor. Preston's hand was warm at her waist, his other hand holding hers with gentle firmness. They began to move to the music, a bit stiffly at first, but soon finding a comfortable rhythm. You dance well for someone out of practice, Olivia observed. My mother insisted on lessons. Said no son of hers would shame her at social gatherings. A shadow of sadness crossed his features. She passed away the year before my father, just after the war ended. I'm sorry, Olivia said softly. My mother died when I was 17. Influenza. Then you understand. It wasn't a question, but a recognition of shared experience. Yes, she said simply. They continued to dance, the conversation giving way to the music. Olivia became increasingly aware of Preston's physicality, the solid strength of his arms supporting her, the clean scent of soap and sunshine that clung to him, the way his eyes sometimes dropped to her lips when she spoke. It was distracting. When the dance ended, Preston led her to the edge of the hall where open windows provided a cooling breeze. Would you like to step outside for a moment? He asked. It's getting rather warm in here. Olivia nodded, and they made their way to the small porch at the back of the building. The night air was refreshingly cool after the heat of the crowded hall, the sky above them a vast canopy of stars. Thank you for coming tonight, Preston said, leaning against the porch railing. I've enjoyed your company. I've enjoyed myself more than I expected to, Olivia admitted. It's been too long since I took time away from the farm. All work makes for a dull life, Preston observed. Something I'm guilty of myself. Is that why you came west? For work? Preston considered the question. Partly. After losing the family farm, I needed to make my own way. But it was more than that. I wanted space to build something on my own terms, free from the shadow of the war and all that was lost. And have you found what you were looking for? Olivia asked. His gaze met hers, steady and searching. I'm beginning to think so. There was a weight to his words that made Olivia's heart beat faster. She looked away, suddenly uncertain of the direction their conversation was taking. We should probably return inside, she said. People will wonder where we've gone. Let them wonder, Preston replied, but he straightened from the railing. Though you're right, of course. As they re-entered the hall, Olivia noticed several glances in their direction, confirming her concern about gossip. Preston must have noticed too, for he maintained a respectful distance as they rejoined the gathering. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, with more conversation than dancing. By the time they left, Olivia had gathered valuable information from local farmers and had even reconnected with a few women she had known before her father's death, women who treated her with kindness rather than the pity she had feared. The ride back to the farm was quiet, both of them tired but content. The night air had grown cooler, and Preston insisted Olivia take his jacket, draping it around her shoulders despite her protests. "I don't want you catching cold," he said. "We have too much work ahead of us." The practicality of his concern made Olivia smile. "Always thinking of the farm." "Not always," he replied softly, his eyes on the road ahead. When they reached the farmhouse, Preston helped Olivia down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. The touch sent a flutter through her stomach that she chose not to examine too closely. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said, removing his jacket and handing it back to him. "The pleasure was mine, Olivia." He hesitated, then added, "I hope we might do it again sometime." The invitation hung between them, carrying implications beyond a simple social outing. Olivia found herself wanting to accept, even as caution held her back. "Perhaps," she said finally. "Good night, Preston." "Good night, Olivia." He waited until she was safely inside before climbing back into the buggy and driving away. Alone in her quiet house, Olivia leaned against the closed door, her mind replaying moments from the evening. Preston's hand at her waist during the dance, the intensity in his eyes on the porch, the warmth of his jacket around her shoulders. Dangerous thoughts, all of them. Preston Northrop was still her employer, still the owner of land that should have been hers. Yet as she prepared for bed, Olivia couldn't deny that something had shifted between them tonight, something that both thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. The weeks following the social brought a subtle change to Olivia and Preston's working relationship. There was an awareness between them now, an undercurrent of something unspoken that colored their interactions. Preston was more careful about maintaining proper distance, yet his eyes often sought hers, lingering a moment too long to be purely professional. For her part, Olivia found herself taking more care with her appearance each morning, though she told herself it was merely a sign of her improving circumstances rather than an effort to impress her employer. The initial payment for her work had allowed her to purchase fabric for a new dress and to replace some of her worn work clothes. The improvements to the farm were beginning to show as well, giving her a sense of accomplishment that had been missing for too long. September brought cooler temperatures and the first real test of their modified irrigation system. A period of light rain, not enough to end the drought, but sufficient to raise the creek level, allowed them to channel water to the newly prepared fields. The system worked better than either of them had dared to hope, delivering water efficiently to areas that had been dry for months. "It's working," Olivia exclaimed, watching the water flow through the channels they had dug with such effort. "Your modifications to my father's design were brilliant." Preston grinned, as pleased as she was by their success. "It was your knowledge of the land that made it possible. I just provided the engineering." They stood side by side, watching their achievement with shared pride. Without thinking, Olivia reached out and squeezed Preston's hand in excitement. The moment their fingers touched, a jolt of awareness passed between them. Preston's smile faded, replaced by an intensity that made Olivia's breath catch. For a heartbeat, she thought he might pull her closer, might act on the tension that had been building between them. Instead, he gently squeezed her hand in return before releasing it. "We should check the northern channel," he said, his voice slightly rougher than normal. "Make sure it's holding properly." The moment passed, but Olivia couldn't forget the look in his eyes or the warmth of his hand in hers. That night, alone in her bed, she confronted the truth she had been avoiding. She was developing feelings for Preston Northrop that went far beyond respect or friendship. The realization was unwelcome. Getting involved with her employer could only complicate an already complex situation. If things went poorly, she would lose not only her heart, but potentially her home and livelihood as well. Yet despite these rational concerns, Olivia couldn't deny the flutter in her chest whenever Preston arrived each morning, or the way she found herself watching him as he worked, admiring his strength and dedication. October brought the first frost and a new phase in their work. With the fields prepared for winter wheat planting, they turned their attention to expanding the orchard as Preston had suggested. He arrived one morning with a wagon full of young apple, pear, and cherry saplings, along with several hands to help with the planting. "This is more than we discussed," Olivia said, surveying the abundance of saplings. I found a nursery in Denver with better prices than expected, Preston explained. And I wanted to diversify beyond just apples. Different harvest times will help spread the risk. His planning impressed her. It showed a commitment to the farm's future that went beyond short-term profit. As they worked together marking out the expanded orchard, Olivia found herself imagining those future harvests, the trees grown tall and laden with fruit, the farm prosperous again. It was a vision that included Preston, she realized, and the thought both pleased and troubled her. The planting took several days of hard work. On the final evening, after the hired hands had gone, Preston and Olivia planted the last sapling together as the sun set behind the mountains, casting golden light across the land. There, Preston said as they packed soil around the slender trunk. In 5 years, this little tree will be bearing fruit. 5 years, Olivia echoed, trying to imagine where she would be then. Would she still be working this land? Would Preston still own it? Would they still be employer and employee, or something else entirely? I believe in planning for the future, Preston said, seeming to read her thoughts. Setting roots that will grow over time. He looked directly at her then, his meaning clear. Olivia's heart quickened. Preston, I know, he interrupted gently. It's complicated. Our arrangement makes it complicated. But I want you to know that I see a future here, Olivia. A future that includes you, if you want it to. The directness of his statement took her breath away. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything now, he assured her. I just wanted my intentions to be clear. I respect you too much for games or uncertainty. Olivia nodded, grateful for his understanding. Thank you for your honesty. I need time to think. Take all the time you need, he said. I'm not going anywhere. As they gathered their tools in companionable silence, Olivia felt both terrified and exhilarated. Preston had made his intentions clear, but the decision was now hers. Did she dare risk her heart on this man who had entered her life under such unusual circumstances? The question occupied her thoughts well into the night, keeping sleep at bay as she weighed caution against growing affection. The following day brought unexpected visitors to the farm. Olivia was working alone, Preston having gone to Julesburg for supplies, when a carriage arrived carrying a well-dressed older couple she didn't recognize. May I help you? She asked as they approached the house. I certainly hope so, my dear, the woman said, her accent marking her as Eastern, perhaps from Boston or New York. We're looking for Preston Northrop. We were told in town that we might find him here. Mr. Northrop is in town at the moment, Olivia replied. He should return later this afternoon. May I tell him who called? The man stepped forward, offering his hand. Richard Northrop, Preston's uncle. This is my wife, Margaret. We've come from Virginia to visit our nephew. Olivia shook his hand, noting the family resemblance in the man's blue eyes and strong jawline. I'm Olivia Kane. Preston should be back within a few hours if you'd like to wait. Kane, Margaret Northrop repeated, her brow furrowing. Are you the former owner of this property? The question caught Olivia off guard. Yes, this was my family's farm. The Northrops exchanged a look that Olivia couldn't quite interpret. Perhaps we should wait for Preston after all, Richard said to his wife before turning back to Olivia. If it wouldn't be too much trouble, Miss Kane. Of course not. Please, come inside. I can offer you refreshments while you wait. As Olivia led them into the house, she felt a growing unease. These sophisticated Easterners seemed out of place in her simple farmhouse, and their reaction to her name suggested they knew something about her situation with Preston. In the kitchen, she served them coffee and some of the fresh bread she had baked that morning. Margaret Northrop looked around the room with poorly concealed curiosity. How long have you been working for our nephew, Miss Kane? She asked. Since August, Olivia replied, choosing her words carefully. Mr. Northrop hired me to help restore the farm after he purchased it. I see. Margaret's tone suggested she saw more than Olivia had intended to reveal. And you live here alone? I do. Mr. Northrop lives at his ranch a few miles west. This information seemed to relieve the older woman slightly. Preston always did have a good head for business, she commented. Hiring someone with your knowledge of the property makes perfect sense. The conversation continued in this vein, with the Northrops asking polite but probing questions about the farm and Olivia's role there. She answered as honestly as possible while maintaining her dignity. increasingly aware that these people were assessing her for reasons beyond mere curiosity. When the sound of a wagon announced Preston's return, Olivia felt a rush of relief. She excused herself and went outside to meet him. "Preston," she called as he climbed down from the wagon. "You have visitors. Your uncle and aunt from Virginia." Preston's expression showed surprise followed quickly by concern. "Uncle Richard and Aunt Margaret? Here." He glanced toward the house. "How long have they been here?" "About an hour." "They've been asking questions." Preston's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm sure they have. I apologize if they made you uncomfortable." "They were perfectly polite," Olivia assured him, though the undercurrent of their questions had indeed left her uneasy. Preston nodded, then placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Let me handle this. They've come a long way, but they won't be staying long." His confident tone reassured her somewhat, though questions remained. Why had Preston never mentioned family in Virginia? And why did their unexpected visit seem to concern him? Inside, the reunion between Preston and his relatives was affectionate but strained. There were embraces and exclamations over how long it had been, but Olivia sensed tension beneath the pleasantries. "You should have written that you were coming," Preston said. "I would have prepared better accommodations." "It was rather a sudden decision," Richard explained. "Margaret has been wanting to see the West, and when we heard you had purchased additional property, it seemed a good time to visit." "How did you hear about the farm?" Preston asked, his tone casual though Olivia detected an edge beneath it. "Mr. Peterson at the bank wrote to our mutual acquaintance in Denver," Margaret said. "Word travels, you know, especially when it involves unusual arrangements." The pointed look she gave Olivia made the meaning clear. The Northrops had heard about Preston buying not just a farm, but the continued services of its former owner. "My arrangement with Miss Kane is a business matter," Preston stated firmly. "She has expertise. This land needs to thrive again." "Of course, dear," Margaret said soothingly. No one suggested otherwise, but her tone implied exactly that, and Olivia felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. These people, strangers to her, were making assumptions about her relationship with Preston based on town gossip. "If you'll excuse me," she said, rising from her chair. "I have work to attend to in the garden." "Actually," Preston interjected, "I was hoping you might help me unload those seed bags from the wagon. They're heavier than I expected." Grateful for the escape, Olivia nodded and followed him outside. Once they were safely out of earshot, Preston spoke quietly. "I'm sorry about this, Olivia. My aunt and uncle are good people, but they have certain expectations about my life and future. They don't approve of your arrangement with me," Olivia stated plainly. "They don't understand it," Preston corrected. "They come from a world of strict social hierarchies. A business arrangement between a man and a woman outside of marriage is unconventional to them, and they've come to investigate," Olivia concluded. Preston sighed. "Essentially, yes. But please don't worry. Their opinion doesn't affect our agreement or my plans for this farm." "What will you tell them?" "The truth that you're an invaluable partner in this venture, and that our arrangement is based on mutual respect and shared goals." He hesitated before adding, "I won't tell them about my personal feelings. That would only complicate matters at this point." Olivia nodded, understanding his reasoning even as she felt a twinge of disappointment. Were his feelings something to be hidden, then? Something his family would disapprove of? "How long will they stay?" she asked. "Not long, I expect. They're on their way to San Francisco ultimately. I'll arrange for them to stay at my ranch tonight, and tomorrow I'll show them around Julesburg. With luck, they'll be on their way west within a few days." The seed bags did indeed need unloading, so they set to work transferring them to the storage shed. As they worked, Olivia found herself wondering what the Northrops' visit meant for her growing relationship with Preston. Were these sophisticated Easterners a glimpse into his past, a world he had left behind but might someday return to? A world where a simple farm woman from Colorado would never belong? The thought troubled her more than she wanted to admit. True to Preston's prediction, his aunt and uncle departed after just 2 days in Julesburg. Their farewell at the farm was cordial, with Margaret Northrop even going so far as to compliment Olivia on the improvements to the property. "You've done remarkable work here," she said, her tone suggesting surprise at the fact. "Preston is fortunate to have found someone who cares for the land as you do." "Thank you, Mrs. Northrop," Olivia replied. The land has always been my primary concern. Yes, I can see that. The older woman hesitated, then added in a lower voice. My nephew thinks very highly of you, Miss Kane. I hope you understand what that means. Before Olivia could respond to this cryptic comment, Margaret had moved on to say her goodbyes to Preston. Minutes later, the Northrops were in their carriage and on their way, leaving Olivia and Preston standing in the yard. Well, Preston said after a moment, that was an unexpected interlude. Your aunt had some interesting parting words for me, Olivia commented. Preston looked at her curiously. Oh, what did she say? That you think very highly of me and that I should understand what that means. Olivia met his gaze directly. What do you think she meant by that? A flush crept up Preston's neck. My aunt has always been perceptive. Perhaps too perceptive. He sighed. I suspect she realized my feelings for you go beyond professional respect. And does that concern her? Not in the way you might think. Preston ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Olivia had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. My aunt and uncle have been trying to see me settled for years. They've even gone so far as to introduce me to suitable young ladies back east. Ah, Olivia said, understanding dawning. And I'm not suitable. That's not, Preston began, then stopped himself. Actually, in their world, you probably wouldn't be considered suitable. Not because of any failing on your part, but because of rigid social conventions that value wealth and family connections above character and capability. And what do you value, Preston? Olivia asked quietly. His blue eyes held her steadily. Strength. Determination. Intelligence. A connection to the land that matches my own. He took a step closer. I value you, Olivia, exactly as you are. The sincerity in his voice made her heart race. They stood close enough now that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool autumn air. My aunt's comment was her way of giving approval. Preston continued softly. In her own roundabout way, she was acknowledging what she saw between us. And what is that exactly? Olivia asked, scarcely daring to breathe. Instead of answering with words, Preston closed the distance between them, his hand gently cupping her cheek as his lips met hers. The kiss was tender at first, a question rather than a demand. When Olivia responded, her hands rising to rest against his chest, Preston deepened the kiss, drawing her closer. Time seemed to stop as they stood there in the yard, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the land they both loved. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Preston kept his arms around her. That's what's between us, he said. Something I've wanted to do since the harvest social. Only since then. Olivia teased, surprising herself with her boldness. Preston laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Well, perhaps earlier, though I tried to be a gentleman about it. You were, she assured him. You are. His expression grew serious again. Olivia, I want to be clear about my intentions. I care for you deeply. These past months working alongside you have shown me that you're exactly the kind of woman I want to build a life with. But our situation is complicated, and I don't want to pressure you. Olivia considered his words carefully. The complications were real. She still worked for him, still lived on land that he owned. Yet the connection between them had grown into something neither of them could deny. I care for you too, she admitted. More than I expected to. But you're right about the complications. I need to know that any decision I make is truly mine, not forced by circumstance. Preston nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then we'll take things slowly. Get to know each other beyond our work together. And I promise you, Olivia, whatever happens between us won't affect your position here. The farm is yours to manage as long as you wish, regardless of personal developments. His assurance eased one of her primary concerns. Thank you for that. It means more than you know. Preston smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture of such tenderness that it made her heart ache. We have time, Olivia. Time to see where this leads us. As if to seal this new understanding, he kissed her once more, briefly but sweetly, before reluctantly stepping back. I should go? There are matters at the ranch I've been neglecting these past few days. Of course, Olivia said, already missing his closeness. I'll see you tomorrow, Preston promised, his eyes lingering on her face as if memorizing every detail. As he rode away, Olivia touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. The future suddenly seemed full of new possibilities, frightening in their unfamiliarity, but exhilarating all the same. The change in Olivia and Preston's relationship brought both joy and uncertainty as autumn deepened toward winter. They continued their work on the farm, their professional partnership now layered with growing personal attachment. Preston was careful to maintain propriety, especially when the hired hands were present, but when they were alone, their conversations grew more intimate, punctuated by increasingly passionate embraces. November brought the first significant snowfall, blanketing the farm in pristine white. The winter wheat they had planted was safely established, protected beneath the insulating layer of snow. With outdoor work limited by the weather, Preston and Olivia turned their attention to repairing farm equipment and planning for spring planting. One snowy afternoon, as they sat at Olivia's kitchen table reviewing seed catalogs, Preston raised a subject they had been carefully avoiding. "I've been thinking about the spring," he said, his finger tracing the edge of a page featuring vegetable varieties. "And about us." Olivia looked up, noting the serious set of his features. "What about us?" "Our arrangement was meant to be temporary, you managing the farm until it was restored to productivity. By spring, we'll have achieved much of what we set out to do." A cold feeling settled in Olivia's stomach. Was he suggesting their arrangement would end? That once the farm was productive again, he would no longer need her services? "I see," she said carefully. "You're considering a change to our agreement." Preston reached across the table to take her hand. "Not in the way you're thinking. Olivia, these past months have shown me that this farm thrives under your care in a way it never would under mine alone. I don't want our professional arrangement to end." Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by confusion. "Then what change are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we consider a more permanent arrangement. One that would secure your future here beyond any professional contract." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I'm asking if you would consider becoming my wife." The proposal, though not entirely unexpected given the direction of their relationship, still took Olivia's breath away. Marriage to Preston would resolve many of the complications between them. She would no longer be his employee, but his partner in the fullest sense. Yet it would also represent a complete transformation of her life and identity. The independent woman who had fought so hard to keep her family's farm would become Mrs. Preston Northrop, with all the societal expectations that role entailed. "This isn't a spur-of-the-moment proposal," Preston continued, seeming to sense her internal conflict. "I've been thinking about it since before my aunt and uncle visited. I love you, Olivia. I want to build a life with you here, on this land we both care for so deeply." The declaration of love, spoken plainly and without artifice, touched something deep within Olivia. In the months they had known each other, Preston had proven himself to be a man of integrity and kindness, someone who valued her not just for her knowledge of the land, but for who she was as a person. "I love you too," she admitted, the words feeling right as she spoke them. "But marriage is a significant step. Are you certain it's what you want?" "More certain than I've been of anything," Preston replied without hesitation. "But I don't need your answer today. I want you to be as sure as I am." Olivia squeezed his hand, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you for that. I do need time to think." "Take all the time you need," he assured her. "I'm not going anywhere." That evening, after Preston had returned to his ranch, Olivia sat by the fire, turning his proposal over in her mind. Marriage had once seemed an unlikely prospect for her. After her father's death, she had been too focused on saving the farm to consider romance, and most men in the area had viewed her as too independent, too focused on her own goals to make a suitable wife. Preston was different. He respected her independence, valued her knowledge, and treated her as an equal in their work together. In his arms, she had discovered a passion she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. The thought of building a life with him, of perhaps one day raising children on the land her father had loved, filled her with unexpected longing. Yet doubts lingered. Would marriage change their dynamic? Would Preston, once they were husband and wife, expect her to become a traditional wife rather than a working partner? And what of the legal implications? As his wife, she would have no separate claim to the land or its profits. Everything would belong to Preston by law. These concerns kept Olivia awake long into the night, her mind weighing love against practicality, desire against caution. By morning, she had reached no firm decision, only a clearer understanding of what she needed to discuss with Preston before she could give him an answer. The opportunity for that discussion came sooner than expected. A severe snowstorm swept through the region the following day, making travel between the ranch and farm impossible. Preston arrived early, concerned about Olivia managing alone in such conditions, and found himself unable to return home as the storm intensified. "You'll have to stay here tonight," Olivia said as they stood at the window watching the blizzard rage outside. "The roads will be impassable until morning at least." The prospect of Preston spending the night in her home created a new tension between them. Though nothing improper would occur, Olivia would make up a bed for him in the small spare room. The situation tested the boundaries they had carefully maintained. "If you're uncomfortable with the arrangement, I can try to make it back to the ranch," Preston offered, though they both knew such an attempt would be foolhardy in the current conditions. "Don't be ridiculous," Olivia replied. "I'm not sending you out in a blizzard." "Besides," she added with a slight smile, "if we're considering marriage, I suppose we should get used to sharing a home." Preston's expression brightened at her words. "Does that mean you're leaning toward acceptance?" "It means I'm considering it seriously," Olivia clarified. "But there are things we need to discuss first." They settled by the fire, the storm howling outside, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. Olivia found the courage to voice her concerns about her role as his wife, about her legal rights to the farm, about whether Preston might someday expect her to set aside her work for more traditional wifely duties. Preston listened attentively, his expression growing more serious as she spoke. When she had finished, he took her hands in his. "I want a partnership, Olivia, not ownership," he said firmly. "Yes, the law would grant me certain rights as your husband, but I would happily sign a legal agreement ensuring your continued control over the farm's operations and guaranteeing your financial interest in the property." His willingness to make such an arrangement surprised and touched Olivia. "You would do that?" Without hesitation. "I didn't fall in love with you despite your independence and capability, but because of those qualities. The last thing I want is for marriage to diminish who you are." The sincerity in his eyes convinced Olivia of his good intentions, easing her primary concerns. They talked long into the night, planning not just their personal future, but the future of the farm. Preston shared his vision for expanding beyond traditional crops, perhaps adding a dairy operation or even experimenting with the new irrigation techniques being developed further west. Olivia contributed her own ideas, her excitement growing as their discussion progressed. By the time they reluctantly parted for the night, Preston to the spare room, Olivia to her bedroom, much had been resolved between them. Though Olivia had not yet given her formal answer to his proposal, they both knew which way she was leaning. Morning brought clear skies and deep snow. They worked together to clear paths to the barn and check on the livestock, their breath creating clouds in the frigid air. The physical labor gave Olivia time to cement her decision, to be certain her heart and mind were in agreement. As they returned to the house, cheeks flushed from cold and exertion, Olivia stopped Preston with a hand on his arm. "Yes," she said simply. Preston looked at her questioningly. Yes, I will marry you, Preston Northrop." A smile spread across her face, reflecting the certainty she now felt. "I want to build that future we talked about. Together." Joy transformed Preston's features. He lifted Olivia off her feet in an exuberant embrace, spinning her around in the snow until they were both laughing. When he set her down, his kiss was filled with promise and passion, a testament to the depth of his feelings. "You've made me the happiest man in Colorado territory," he declared. "When shall we be married? Spring? Summer? What about Christmas?" Olivia suggested. "It's only 3 weeks away. We could have a small ceremony in town, perhaps at the community hall." Preston's eyebrows rose in surprise. "So soon? Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything," Olivia replied. "We've known each other for months, worked side by side through difficulties and successes. I don't need a long engagement to know my own mind." The truth was, now that she had made her decision, Olivia saw no reason to wait. Her practical nature recognized the advantages of being married before spring planting began, and her heart simply wanted to begin their life together as soon as possible. Preston's smile returned, brighter than before. "Christmas it is, then. I'll ride into town as soon as the roads are clear to speak with the minister and make arrangements." The following weeks passed in a flurry of preparations. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Julesburg, generating a mixture of curiosity and goodwill. Some of the town's older residents remembered Thomas Kane fondly and were pleased to see his daughter finding happiness after such difficult years. True to his word, Preston had his lawyer draw up documents ensuring Olivia's legal interest in the farm regardless of their marital status. The gesture reinforced her confidence in his respect for her independence, making her even more certain of her decision. Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow blanketing the landscape in pristine white. Olivia dressed carefully in a new gown of deep blue wool, a gift from Preston that complemented her auburn hair and green eyes. She had no family to accompany her to the ceremony, but Mrs. Gardner, the wife of the farmer who had shared his wheat knowledge at the social, had offered to help her prepare and to stand with her during the service. "You look beautiful, my dear," the older woman said as she fastened a borrowed pearl comb in Olivia's upswept hair. "Preston Northrop is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Olivia replied, thinking of how different her life might have been if Preston hadn't purchased her farm and offered her the chance to stay. What had begun as a business arrangement born of necessity had transformed into the greatest blessing of her life. The community hall had been decorated with evergreen boughs and ribbons for the holiday, creating a festive atmosphere for the wedding. As Olivia entered on the arm of Sheriff Wilson, who had volunteered to give her away, she saw Preston waiting at the front, handsome in a new suit, his face lighting up at the sight of her. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, their vows spoken clearly before the gathered townspeople and the few hands from Preston's ranch who had become friends over the months. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Preston's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. The celebration afterward was joyful, with music and dancing continuing well into the evening. As Preston led Olivia in a waltz, she marveled at the turn her life had taken. "Happy, Mrs. Northrop?" Preston asked, his eyes never leaving her face. "Very happy, Mr. Northrop," she replied. The new name felt strange on her tongue, but not unwelcome. She was still Olivia, still the same woman who had fought so hard to keep her farm alive, but now she had a partner in that fight, someone who valued her strength rather than being intimidated by it. Later that night, as they rode to the farm in Preston's sleigh, the stars brilliant in the clear winter sky above them, Olivia felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The farmhouse glowed with welcome as they approached, lamps lit earlier by Mrs. Gardner to greet the newlyweds. Preston lifted Olivia from the sleigh and carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, a fire crackling in the hearth and a small Christmas tree decorated with paper ornaments standing in the corner. "Welcome home, wife," Preston said softly, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her. "Welcome home, husband," Olivia replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. The kiss deepened quickly, months of restrained passion finally finding release. Preston's hands tangled in her hair, dislodging Mrs. Gardner's pearl comb as he pulled her closer. Olivia responded with equal fervor, her body molding to his as they began to discover each other in this new way. Later, lying in each other's arms in the bedroom that was now theirs, Olivia traced the line of Preston's jaw with gentle fingers. "I never expected this," she confessed. "When you first arrived at the farm with the sheriff and banker, I thought you were the worst thing that could happen to me." Preston caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "And now I know you were the best thing," Olivia said simply. "You saved not just the farm, but me as well. You gave me hope when I had none." "You saved me too," Preston replied. "I came west looking for something I couldn't name, something I'd lost during the war, perhaps. I found it here, with you." As snow began to fall softly outside their window, Olivia and Preston drifted to sleep in each other's arms, their future stretching before them like the untouched snowdrifts, pure, full of possibility, and theirs to shape together. Spring brought renewal to the Kane Northrop farm, as Preston and Olivia had taken to calling their joint enterprise. The winter wheat emerged green and promising from beneath the melting snow, and the young orchard showed signs of new growth. With the warmer weather came a flurry of activity: fields to prepare, seeds to plant, irrigation channels to clear. Married life suited them both. Preston had moved his personal belongings to the farmhouse, but maintained his ranch as a separate operation, riding there several times a week to oversee the cattle business. The arrangement gave them both the togetherness of marriage and the independence they valued. Their work partnership had grown stronger through their personal connection. They complemented each other perfectly. Olivia's deep knowledge of the farm's specific conditions balancing Preston's broader agricultural experience and business acumen. Together, they implemented innovative techniques that soon had neighboring farmers taking notice. By summer, their efforts were showing visible results. The irrigated fields flourished despite continuing dry conditions, and the expanded orchard had survived its first season with minimal losses. Preston had connections in Denver that helped them secure favorable prices for their wheat, and they had begun planning a small dairy operation for the following year. July brought unexpected news that would change their lives once again. Olivia had been feeling unwell for several weeks, tired, queasy in the mornings, her monthly cycle absent. At first, she attributed the symptoms to the intense summer work schedule, but as they persisted, a different explanation suggested itself. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset after a long day's work, Olivia turned to Preston with a mix of nervousness and joy. "I believe I'm going to have a baby," she said quietly. Preston's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face transformed with wonder and delight as he knelt before her chair, his hands gently covering hers. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our child." Olivia nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Due in winter, I think. January or February." Preston kissed her with such tenderness that it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "For this gift, for everything." The pregnancy brought changes to their routine. Preston insisted that Olivia reduce her physical labor, hiring additional help for the farm so she could focus on less strenuous tasks. At first, Olivia resisted, concerned that her condition would be used to diminish her role in their partnership. "I'm with child, not ill," she protested one day when Preston suggested she leave the fence repair to him and the hired hands. "Women have been working while carrying children since the beginning of time." "I know," Preston acknowledged, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "But those women didn't have husbands who could afford to hire help. We do. Let me do this for you, Olivia. Not because I think you're incapable, but because I love you and want to protect you both." Put that way, Olivia found it difficult to argue. And as her body changed, she grudgingly admitted that some tasks were becoming more challenging. She redirected her energy to planning and management, ordering supplies, keeping the farm's books, supervising the kitchen garden that would provide food for their table through the winter. Fall brought a bountiful harvest, vindicating their hard work and innovative methods. The wheat yield was the best the farm had seen in years, and they had even managed a small crop of late vegetables that fetched good prices in Julesburg. As Olivia's belly grew rounded with their child, the farm grew prosperous under their joint care. "We should celebrate," Preston declared one evening in late October as they reviewed the season's accounts. "The farm has more than broken even this year. By next harvest, we should be showing a significant profit." "I think that calls for more than a celebration," Olivia said thoughtfully. "Perhaps it's time to think about expansion." Preston looked at her curiously. "What did you have in mind?" "The Matthews property to the east has been abandoned since old Mr. Matthews died last winter," Olivia explained. "His children all moved to California years ago and have shown no interest in the land. It would connect directly to our eastern field and has its own small creek that could supplement our water supply." The suggestion sparked a lengthy discussion of possibilities. By the time they went to bed that night, they had sketched out a 5-year plan for gradually expanding their operation while maintaining the quality and innovation that had brought them success. As they lay together in the darkness, Preston's hand resting protectively over the swell of Olivia's stomach where their child grew, she marveled at how far they had come in just over a year. From near destitution to prosperity, from suspicious strangers to loving partners building a future together. "What are you thinking?" Preston asked softly, sensing her wakefulness. "About us," Olivia replied. "About how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't been the one to buy this farm." Preston's arms tightened around her. "I believe some things are meant to be, Olivia. This farm, us, Our child, it all feels like it was always supposed to happen this way. Olivia wasn't generally inclined towards such philosophical thinking, but in that moment, wrapped in her husband's arms with their baby moving beneath her heart, she could almost believe he was right. Winter arrived early that year, with the first heavy snow falling in November. By December, Olivia was finding movement increasingly difficult as her pregnancy advanced. Preston had transformed the downstairs sewing room into a temporary bedroom to spare her the climb up the stairs, much to her relief, though she would never have requested such an accommodation herself. Christmas was a quiet affair, just the two of them exchanging simple gifts by the fire. Preston had commissioned a beautiful cradle from a carpenter in Julesburg, intricately carved with leaves and vines that echoed the orchard they had planted together. Olivia had sewn him a warm quilt for his long rides to and from the ranch, using scraps saved from her dressmaking to create a pattern that told the story of their first year together. "It's perfect," Preston said, running his hands over the detailed needlework. "Just like you." Olivia laughed, gesturing to her swollen figure. "Hardly perfect at the moment. Especially perfect now," he corrected, his eyes warm with love. "You're carrying our future, Olivia. There's nothing more beautiful than that." January brought bitter cold and Olivia's confinement to the house. Dr. Wilson, the sheriff's brother and Julesburg's only physician, had advised against any travel or outdoor exertion as her time grew near. Preston arranged for Mrs. Gardner to stay with them, her experience with childbirth a comfort as they awaited the baby's arrival. On a snowy night in late January, Olivia's labor began. Preston sent a ranch hand racing through the darkness to fetch Dr. Wilson, while Mrs. Gardner prepared the bedroom with practiced efficiency. The pain was intense, more severe than anything Olivia had experienced, but she faced it with the same determination she had brought to every challenge in her life. Preston was a constant presence, wiping her brow, holding her hands through contractions, murmuring encouragement when her strength flagged. His steady support gave her courage through the long hours of labor. Near dawn, after what seemed an eternity of effort, their son was born, a robust boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs powerful enough to announce his arrival to the world with authority. Dr. Wilson placed the squalling infant on Olivia's chest, his tiny body warm against her skin. "He's perfect," Preston whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he gazed at their child. "Absolutely perfect." Through her exhaustion, Olivia felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. This tiny being, created from their love and now dependent on them for everything, represented the future they had worked so hard to build. "What shall we name him?" she asked, her voice hoarse from the exertions of labor. "Thomas," Preston suggested without hesitation. "After your father." "Thomas Preston Northrop." The tribute to her father touched Olivia deeply. "Thomas," she agreed, stroking the baby's downy head. "Welcome to the world, little one. You have quite a legacy to grow into." The weeks following Thomas's birth were a blur of exhaustion and joy. Preston proved to be an attentive father, willingly taking his turn walking the floor with their fussing son in the middle of the night so Olivia could rest. His tenderness with the baby revealed yet another facet of the man she had married, a gentleness that complemented his strength. By spring, Olivia was gradually resuming her role in the farm's operation, though now with Thomas strapped to her back or nestled in a basket nearby as she worked. The sight of his wife and son together in the fields or garden became Preston's favorite vision, the embodiment of everything he had come west to find. The Matthews property was indeed available for purchase, and with the profits from their successful harvest, Preston and Olivia were able to make the acquisition. Their 5-year plan was now in motion, with new fields to prepare and possibilities to explore. On a warm evening in May, as they sat on the porch with Thomas sleeping peacefully in Olivia's arms, Preston reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "When I first saw this farm, it was in ruins," he said quietly. "The drought had all but destroyed it, and most people in town thought it was a foolish investment. Including me," Olivia added with a small smile. "I thought you were either crazy or had ulterior motives." Preston laughed softly, careful not to wake the baby. "Perhaps a bit of both. But I saw something here that others missed: potential. Not just in the land, though that was part of it. I saw it in you, Olivia. your determination, your knowledge, your love for this place. And now, Olivia asked, curious about how he viewed their accomplishments. Now I see a future beyond anything I imagined, Preston said, his hand gently stroking Thomas's dark hair. A family, a thriving farm, a legacy to pass down to our children. Children, Olivia repeated, raising an eyebrow. Are you planning more than one, Mr. Northrop? Preston's smile was both tender and mischievous. I wouldn't object to a sister or brother for Thomas when the time is right. Perhaps a little girl with her mother's green eyes and stubborn spirit. The thought warmed Olivia's heart. A daughter to teach and nurture, to share the knowledge her own mother and father had passed to her. I wouldn't object either, she admitted, though perhaps not too soon. We have an expansion to manage first. Always the practical one. Preston teased, leaning over to kiss her softly. It's one of the many reasons I love you. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting golden light across their expanding fields, Olivia surveyed the farm that had once been her family's legacy and was now the foundation of a new legacy she and Preston were building together. From nearly losing everything to gaining more than she had ever dreamed possible, the journey had been unexpected but perfect in its own way. In Preston's arms, with their son between them, Olivia Kane Northrop found a contentment she had never thought possible when that wagon had rattled up to her door nearly 2 years before. The drought had broken, literally and figuratively. Their land was flourishing, their family growing, their future secure. What had begun as a desperate arrangement had blossomed into love, partnership, and a shared vision that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had transformed a failing farm into a thriving enterprise, and in the process, had found in each other exactly what they needed to make their dreams come true. 5 years later, the orchard was in full bloom, apple and cherry blossoms creating a canopy of pink and white above the grassy paths. Olivia walked slowly, 4-year-old Thomas racing ahead, while she carried 2-year-old Margaret on her hip. The little girl, named for Preston's aunt who had unexpectedly become a supportive presence in their lives, reached out chubby hands toward the blossoms. Pretty, Margaret said, her vocabulary growing daily. Yes, very pretty, Olivia agreed. Your father and I planted these trees before you were born. Thomas circled back, his boundless energy a constant in their lives. Papa said they're going to make lots of apples this year, he reported importantly. The most ever. Your papa is right, Olivia confirmed. This will be our best harvest yet. The expanded orchard had become one of their most successful ventures, with Preston's prediction about drought resistance proving accurate. Even in drier years, the established trees produced reliably, providing a stable income to complement their more traditional crops. The Matthews property had been fully integrated into their operation, and they had recently purchased another adjacent parcel, bringing their total acreage to 3 times the size of the original Kane farm. The dairy operation was thriving, with a small cheese-making facility that produced specialty items sold as far away as Denver. Preston appeared at the end of the orchard row, leading his horse. He had been riding the boundaries, checking irrigation channels and fences as he did regularly during the growing season. At the sight of his family, his face lit with the same joy it had shown on their wedding day. There are my treasures, he called, opening his arms to catch Thomas, who ran to him with delighted shrieks. We're checking the blossoms, Papa, the boy reported. Mama says it's going to be the best harvest ever. Your mama is very wise, Preston replied, swinging his son onto his shoulders before approaching Olivia and Margaret. He kissed his wife tenderly, then planted a kiss on his daughter's cheek. And how are my favorite ladies today? Watching your son tire himself out before dinner, Olivia replied with a smile. And enjoying the orchard. It's never been more beautiful. Preston looked around at the flowering trees, satisfaction evident in his expression. Worth every minute of work, wasn't it? Just like you said it would be. His acknowledgement of her foresight still pleased Olivia, even after years of partnership. They had developed a rhythm to their life and work that utilized both their strengths, each contributing to decisions while respecting the other's expertise in certain areas. I have news from town, Preston said as they began walking back toward the house. The railroad is definitely coming through Julesburg. Construction begins next spring. This confirmation of rumors they had been hearing for months was significant. A rail connection would transform their shipping capabilities, opening markets that had been impractical to reach by wagon. That will change everything, Olivia said thoughtfully. We should consider adjusting our crop planning for next year. Perhaps increase the vegetable production for shipping east. Already thinking ahead, Preston said with admiration. I've been considering the same, along with expanding the cheese production. Fresh dairy products could reach Denver in hours instead of days. Their conversation continued as they walked, the children interjecting occasional observations or questions. This was the pattern of their day's work and family, seamlessly interwoven, each enhancing the other rather than competing for attention. The farmhouse came into view, substantially enlarged from the modest structure Olivia had once feared losing. They had added a proper dining room, a study for Preston, and additional bedrooms upstairs for the children and occasional guests. The original kitchen remained the heart of the home, though modernized with a new stove and expanded pantry. As they approached, Olivia spotted a rider coming up the road from town. Luke Gardner, their neighbor's son who often carried messages or packages from Julesburg. Mr. and Mrs. Northrop, Luke called as he drew near. I've got a telegram for you from back east. Came in this afternoon. Preston took the envelope, tipping Luke for his trouble before opening the message. As he read, his expression grew serious. What is it? Olivia asked, concern rising at his prolonged silence. My Uncle Richard has died, Preston said quietly. Aunt Margaret asks if we might come east for the funeral and to help settle his affairs. Oh, Preston, I'm so sorry, Olivia said, shifting Margaret to her other hip so she could place a comforting hand on her husband's arm. Though she had met Richard Northrop only twice, she knew Preston had maintained a close correspondence with his uncle over the years. Preston folded the telegram carefully. We'll need to leave within the week if we're to arrive in time. The journey will take at least 10 days. We? Olivia questioned. All of us. I'd like that, yes, Preston said. Aunt Margaret specifically mentions wanting to see the children. And I. He hesitated. I'd rather not face this without you, if you're willing to make the journey. The vulnerability in his request touched Olivia deeply. After all these years, Preston still occasionally surprised her with these glimpses into his heart. Of course we'll come, she assured him. The farm can manage without us for a few weeks. Johnson is more than capable of overseeing things in our absence. Their foreman, hired 2 years prior as their operation expanded, had proven himself reliable and knowledgeable. With detailed instructions, he could maintain the essential work until they returned. That evening, after the children were asleep, Preston and Olivia sat on the porch as they had so many nights before, planning the logistics of their journey east. The trip would be their first significant time away from the farm since their marriage, and the first time either child had traveled beyond Julesburg. Are you certain about this? Preston asked as they finalized their arrangements. It's a long journey with young children. I'm certain, Olivia confirmed. This is important to you, which makes it important to me. Besides, she added with a smile, it might be good for the children to see something of the world beyond Colorado. Preston's arm tightened around her shoulders. What did I do to deserve you, Olivia Northrop? You bought a failing farm and hired its previous owner, she replied lightly. Best business decision you ever made, by your own admission. The best decision of any kind I ever made, Preston corrected, his tone serious despite her teasing. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't purchased this land, if you had been forced to leave. Olivia had wondered the same thing over the years. The thought of how differently her life might have unfolded working as a laundress or cook in some distant town, struggling merely to survive rather than building something meaningful, made her profoundly grateful for the turn her fate had taken. We found each other, she said simply. Despite all the odds and circumstances, we found each other and built this life together. I wouldn't change a single moment of it. As they sat together in the growing darkness, the farm quiet around them save for the gentle sounds of night creatures, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that terrible day when she thought she had lost everything, to this moment of profound contentment and purpose, it had been a path neither of them could have predicted. The woman who had been sold along with her failing farm had found not servitude but partnership, not loss but fulfillment beyond her wildest dreams. And the cowboy who had bought the land and asked her to stay had found not just an experienced farm manager but the love of his life, the mother of his children, the partner in all his endeavors. Together, they had transformed a broken piece of land into a thriving enterprise, a simple house into a joyful home, and two separate lives into one shared journey that would continue to unfold in ways they had yet to imagine. Through drought and plenty, through loss and new beginnings, they had built something that would endure long after they were gone, a legacy of love, determination, and deep connection to the land they both cherished. As Preston kissed her beneath the canopy of stars, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they had faced every challenge since that fateful day when a rattling buckboard wagon had jerked her awake to the beginning of the greatest adventure of her life.